It happened again. You are Ferruccio Lamborghini. You're one of the richest men in Italy. You're driving the most expensive car in the world, a Ferrari 250 GT. And for the third time this month, you're stranded on the side of the road. Most men would call a tow truck. Most men would quietly pay the repair bill. But Ferruccio Lamborghini is not most men. He's a mechanic who built an empire out of leftover war junk and dirt. And as he stands there looking at the smoke rising from the hood of his thoroughbred machine, he doesn't feel admiration. He feels cheated. He realizes that Enzo Ferrari, the god of Italian motoring, isn't selling him a dream. He's selling him a lie. Business isn't just about money. It's war. Welcome to Corporate Wars. I'm Thomas Levkremsel. Today, the story of a 10 lira clutch plate that destroyed a monopoly. How a tractor mechanic declared war on the most famous brand on earth, and why the Lamborghini exists for one reason and one reason only: spite. Act 1. The Motor Valley. To understand this war, you have to understand the battlefield. We are in the Emilia-Romagna region of Italy, Modena, Bologna, Sant'Agata. They call it the Motor Valley. In the 1950s, this wasn't just a place where cars were made. It was a crucible. Italy was going through the miracolo economico, the economic miracle. A country that had been bombed into rubble a decade earlier was suddenly waking up. It was transforming from a land of farmers into a global industrial powerhouse. And standing on top of this transformation were two titans, two men who represented the two souls of Italy. On one side, you had Enzo Ferrari, the Duke of Maranello. Born in 1898, Enzo was royalty, not by blood, but by sheer force of will. He was a racing purist, a man who wore dark sunglasses indoors and ruled his factory like a feudal lord. To Enzo, the road car, the vehicle you buy to drive to the grocery store, was a necessary evil. He hated them. He famously said he only sold road cars to fund his racing team, Scuderia Ferrari. His cars were fast. They were beautiful, but they were fragile. They were race cars with license plates. They were loud, hot, and temperamental. And if you complained, Enzo didn't care. If the car broke, it wasn't because of something Enzo did. It was because you didn't know how to drive it. On the other side, you had Ferruccio Lamborghini. Born in 1916 in a small hamlet called Renazzo, Ferruccio was a man of the soil. His parents were grape farmers. They wanted him to tend to the vines. But Ferruccio didn't care about grapes. He cared about the machines that harvested them. His education didn't happen in a university. It happened in World War II. Drafted into the Italian Royal Air Force, he was stationed on the island of Rhodes in Greece. He was part of the 50th Mixed Maneuver Motor Fleet. It sounds fancy, but it really wasn't. He was isolated, no supply lines, no new parts. If a truck engine blew up, Ferruccio couldn't order a spare. He had to build one, from scrap, from melted down metal. This experience rewired his brain. He learned a philosophy of engineering that was the exact opposite of Ferrari's. To Ferruccio, a machine wasn't supposed to be temperamental. It was supposed to work every time, even under fire. When he came back to Italy in 1947, Ferruccio saw a country that was hungry, literally. The farmers needed tractors. So Ferruccio did something brilliant. He bought surplus military vehicles, old British Morris engines, and converted them into tractors. He invented a fuel atomizer that allowed these engines to start on gasoline but run on diesel, which was much cheaper for the farmers. It made him a fortune. By the late 1950s, Lamborghini Trattori was building 400 vehicles a month. He expanded into air conditioning and heating. Ferruccio Lamborghini was one of the richest men in Italy. He had new money. He was loud, he was stocky, and he liked to show off. Act 2. The 10 lira insult. When you're a rich Italian industrialist in the 1950s, you buy toys. Ferruccio had them all. A 1953 Mercedes 300 SL Gullwing, a Jaguar E-Type, 2 Maserati 3500 GTs. But as a patriot, he wanted the best Italy had to offer. He wanted the prancing horse. In 1958, he bought his first Ferrari, a 250 GT Coupe by Pininfarina. He loved the status. He loved the noise. But remember, Ferruccio wasn't a race car driver. He was a businessman. He used these cars to drive clients to lunch. He drove them hard in traffic, slipping the clutch to keep the revs high. And the Ferrari couldn't take it. The clutch kept burning out. Ferruccio would drive the car back to Maranello. The Ferrari mechanics would take it for a few days, replace the clutch, and hand him a massive bill. A month later, it burnt out again. Finally, Ferruccio got tired of the dance. He drove the broken Ferrari into his own tractor factory in Cento. He called over his head mechanic. He said, "Drop the transmission. Let's see what these magicians in Maranello are actually doing." They took the car apart. They pulled out the burnt clutch plate. Ferruccio picked it up. He looked at it, and he frowned. He walked over to the shelf where they kept spare parts for his small tractors. He pulled down a box. It was the same part. The clutch in the Ferrari 250 GT was a commercial component made by Fichtel und Sachs. It was the exact same clutch Lamborghini used in his tractors. But there was one key difference. Ferruccio paid 10 lira for that clutch. Adjusted for inflation today, that same clutch today would cost between 50 and 75 cents. Ferrari was charging him 1,000 lira for it, the equivalent of between $25 and $35 today, a 10,000% markup for a tractor part. This was the moment the war started. It wasn't about the money. Ferruccio had plenty of money. It was about the insult. Enzo Ferrari was selling a myth. He was packaging agricultural parts in a beautiful red shell and charging a king's ransom. And worse, he was under-engineering the car. Ferruccio knew immediately that the clutch was too small for the torque of a V12 engine. It was bad engineering. Ferruccio fixed it himself. He grabbed a larger clutch from his tractor inventory, modified the flywheel, and installed it. The problem was solved. The car never broke again. But Ferruccio wasn't satisfied. He wanted to look the king in the eye. Act 3. The Tractor Driver. (1963) Maranello. Ferruccio Lamborghini drives to the Ferrari factory. He demands a meeting with Il Commendatore, Enzo Ferrari. Now, accounts vary on where exactly this happened. Some say in Enzo's office, some say on the factory floor. But everyone agrees on what was said. Ferruccio walked in as a peer. He wasn't a fanboy. He was a fellow CEO. He said, "Ferrari, your cars are rubbish. The clutch is too weak. I fixed it for you, but you need to change your design." Enzo Ferrari sat there. He adjusted his dark sunglasses. He looked at this stocky, sweaty man in front of him. This man who smelled like diesel, grapes, and soil. Enzo didn't hear constructive criticism. He heard a peasant telling a king how to build a kingdom. Enzo's reply has echoed through history. He said, "You are a tractor driver. You are a farmer. You shouldn't complain about driving my cars because they are the best cars in the world." And then, the kill shot. Let me make cars. You stick to making tractors. Enzo turned his back. The meeting was over. He thought he'd crushed a nuisance, but he had no idea what he had just done. Ferruccio walked out of the room. He was shaking, not with fear, but with rage. He drove back to his factory. He gathered his family and his engineers. Tonino Lamborghini, his son, remembers this moment clearly. Ferruccio slammed his hand on the dinner table and said, "I will show him. I will make a sports car, and it will be better than his in every single way." Act 4. The Palace Revolt. Ferruccio had the money. He had the anger, but he didn't have the know-how. Building a tractor is not the same as building a 150-mile-per-hour Grand Tourer in the 60s. To beat Ferrari, he needed a weapon. And, as luck would have it, Enzo Ferrari himself had just handed him one. In 1961, 2 years before the argument, Ferrari had imploded. It was called the Palace Revolt. Enzo's wife, Laura, had been terrorizing the factory. She was interfering with the engineers, shouting at executives. The entire senior staff gave Enzo an ultimatum. Either she goes, or we go. Enzo Ferrari didn't do ultimatums. He fired them all. He fired his chief engineer, Carlo Citti. He fired his development chief, Giotto Bizzarini, the man who invented the Ferrari 250 GTO. These were the Gang of Five, the most brilliant automotive minds in Italy, suddenly unemployed and angry. Ferruccio Lamborghini took note. He opened his checkbook and he hired them all. He bought a plot of land in Sant'Agata Bolognese, just 15 kilometers away from Ferrari's front door, and he built the anti-Ferrari factory. Ferrari's factory was dark, old, and chaotic. Lamborghini's factory was bright, modern, and efficient. He even installed central heating in the workshop floor, something unheard of in Italy at the time. He treated his mechanics like talent, not labor. He gave Giotto Bizzarini a simple brief for the engine. I want a V12. I want 3.5 liters. And I want it to beat Ferrari. Ferruccio famously included a clause in the contract. For every single horsepower this engine produces over the Ferrari engine, I will pay you a cash bonus. Bizzarini went to work. The Ferrari 250 engine was an older design. It used a single overhead camshaft. It was good, but it was dated. Bizzarini designed a monster. Dual overhead camshafts, dry sump lubrication, 6 massive vertical Weber carburetors. On the dyno, it screamed to 9,000 RPM. It produced 360 horsepower. The Ferrari 250 GT only made 240. This wasn't just a win. This was a massacre. Act 5. The Brick Engine. But there was a problem. Bizzarini had built a racing engine. It was loud, peaky, and impossible to drive in traffic. Ferruccio hated it. He kept saying, I don't want a race car. I want a GT. I want to drive this to the opera without sweating. He wanted refinement. They were running out of time. The Turin Auto Show was days away. They needed a prototype to show the world. They hired a designer named Franco Scaglione to build the body. He created a futuristic, sharp-edged shape called the 350 GTV. It looked incredible, but when they tried to lower the hood, it wouldn't close. Bizarini's engine was too tall. Those massive vertical carburetors stuck up like towers. They were 48 hours away from the biggest auto show in the world. They had a car and they had an engine, but they couldn't fit together. So Ferruccio did what a farmer does. He improvised. He took the engine out of the car. They filled the engine bay with bricks, ceramic tiles, floor scraps, anything heavy they could find in the factory to weigh the front suspension down so it looked correct. They locked the hood shut. At the auto show, Ferruccio stood next to the car, smiling, shaking hands. Journalists begged him, Signor Lamborghini, show us the engine. He would smile and say, I'm sorry, the latch is jammed, but trust me, it's a masterpiece. The real engine was sitting on a stand next to the car. It was the ultimate bluff, and it worked. The orders poured in. Act 6. The Redemption. After the show, Ferruccio got serious. He hired a young engineer named Gianpaolo Dallara. a man who would go on to become a legend in his own right. He told Dallara, "Civilize this beast." They detuned the engine for the road. They switched the carburetors so the hood would close. They lowered the red line. And in 1964, they launched the production car, the Lamborghini 350 GT. This is the car that proved the tractor driver was right. Let's take a look at the scorecard. The Ferrari 250 GT, solid rear axle, old technology, 4-speed gearbox, single cam engine. The Lamborghini 350 GT, fully independent suspension on all 4 wheels, a modern technology, a 5-speed ZF gearbox, dual cam engine, and the clutch, it was robust, it was heavy duty, and it never broke. Ferruccio Lamborghini had delivered on his threat. He had built a car that was faster, smoother, and better engineered than the Ferrari. This victory changed everything. Just 2 years later, in 1966, this same team, Dallara, Stanzani, Wallace, would reveal the Lamborghini Miura. It was the first road car in history to put the engine in the middle, behind the driver. It coined the term supercar. When the Miura launched, Enzo Ferrari's front-engine cars looked like antiques overnight. The king had been dethroned by the peasant. Ferruccio ran the company for 10 years. He proved his point, and then, in 1974, satisfied, he sold the company and retired to a vineyard to tend to the vines. He didn't care about the legacy of racing. He cared about winning the argument. Act 7. The Lesson. We often look at billionaires and assume their empires are built on grand visions, strategic master plans. But the story of Lamborghini proves that sometimes the most powerful force in capitalism is simple, petty human emotion. If Enzo Ferrari had been polite, if he had just said, "Thank you, Ferruccio, we'll look into that clutch," Lamborghini would likely still just be a tractor company today. There would be no Miura, no Countach, no Aventador. Enzo Ferrari created his own worst enemy. He underestimated the peasant with dirt under his fingernails. And in the corporate wars, underestimating the competition is a mistake you can only make once. This has been Corporate Wars. If you want to dive deeper into the technical details of this rivalry, I highly recommend the book Valentino Balboni, The Best Job in the World, and the official biography Ferruccio Lamborghini, La Storia Ufficiale. If you enjoyed this episode, do me a favor. Send it to one friend who thinks they know about cars. Next week, we're going to the jungle. We're talking about the United Fruit Company and how a banana brand convinced the US government to overthrow a democracy. I'm Tomislav Krebzel, and I'll see you in the boardroom.